It's November 14, 2024. Maori politicians in Parliament start a haka protesting what's being called New Zealand's most racist piece of legislation in 100 years.
The only reason this parliament exists in Aotearoa is because our tipuna consented to it.
See, Maori are the Indigenous people of New Zealand, or as they call it, Aotearoa. They have their own language, culture, and a sacred relationship with the land. People of Maori descent make up almost 20% of the country's population. That's nearly 1 in 5 New Zealanders. Unlike many other places where Indigenous populations were decimated by colonisation, Maori survived. Their ancestors' resistance to British rule was so strong that they managed to secure the recognition of certain rights in the Treaty of Waitangi, New Zealand's founding document. The new Treaty Principles Bill aims to revoke all of that.
We are the kingmakers, we are the sovereign people of this land, and the world is watching us here.
This isn't just another piece of legislation. It's an attempt to fundamentally reshape the relationship between Maori and the New Zealand state. What's unfolding is more than a political battle. This is a story about a fight for cultural survival, Indigenous rights, and the very future of New Zealand's identity. After 6 years of being run by a left-leaning government, New Zealand is now run by one of the most right-wing coalition governments it's had in decades. Within its first 100 days, the government started dismantling years of Maori rights. It got rid of the Maori Health Authority, an institution specifically designed to address the health disparities facing Maori communities. It also limited Maori involvement in local government and even scaled back the use of the Maori language in government communications, undermining decades of work to revitalise that critical aspect of Maori identity. But that was just the warm-up.
Racism is deeply embedded in New Zealand. They've deprived us of just about everything they can deprive us of. That does not change the fact that Māori are the Indigenous people of this country.
That's Margaret Mutu. She's the Professor of Maori Studies at the University of Auckland and the head of a Maori nation, or as they call it, iwi, in the far north of New Zealand.
As Māori become more and more articulate, more and more forthright about the fact that we are not going to be denied the right to be who we are, that we are going to take back what was stolen from us, then you started getting this backlash, this white backlash.
Enter the Treaty Principles Bill. The bill proposes a referendum on the Treaty of Waitangi's principles to make them apply to all New Zealanders equally.
The same rights, the same dignities for being human.
While that might sound fair on the surface, it's crucial to understand what's really at stake. The bill was introduced by this guy, David Seymour of the political party ACT. He argues that the so-called race-based policies that aid Maori communities create division and inequality in New Zealand society. But here's the thing, Maori are disproportionately disadvantaged. Despite making up about 20% of the population, Maori represent 52% of the prison population. Maori have lower life expectancy, with the gap between Maori and non-Maori being 7 years. They also have lower incomes and a greater likelihood of living in poverty-stricken areas. The Treaty Principles Bill seeks to effectively dissolve the special constitutional status of Maori as tangata whenua, meaning people of the land, and treaty partners. This would impact everything from land rights to cultural protections to resource management. It could also affect Maori language education programs.
He waka ake noa.
He waka eke noa.
Cultural heritage preservation, and even the ongoing process of settling historical grievances through the Waitangi Tribunal. But more on that later.
Although we've been colonised and although there was an attempt to assimilate us, we have always managed to maintain very strong aspects of our culture, of our language. And so when these attacks, these open attacks started at the beginning of last year, we did what we always do, which is we come together. We got our young people to organise a national march, a national protest march against it. And at that one, we quite specifically asked all of our, what we call tangata treaty, the people who are in this country by right of the treaty, because that's how non-Māori came to be in this country, is through the treaty. So we asked those who were people of the treaty to please come with us on that march.
In fact, it was the largest Maori protest in New Zealand's history. It lasted 9 days and an estimated 42,000 people marched toward the capital from all over the country. Which brings us to the centre of all this. The Treaty of Waitangi. New Zealand's founding document was signed in 1840 between Maori chiefs and representatives of the British Crown. There were 2 versions, one in English and one in Te Reo Maori, the Maori language. In the English version, the British wrote that Maori cede to Her Majesty the Queen of England all rights and power of sovereignty. But the Maori version promised the British something much more limited, just governance, kawanatanga, over the land, meaning Maori would keep absolute authority, tino rangatiratanga, over their lands, resources, homes and treasured possessions, and the British would have control solely over their subjects on the islands. It's important to note that over 500 Maori chiefs signed the Maori version, while only 39 signed the English version. Those 39 signatures were enough for the British Empire to do what they've always done: colonize. In 1840, an estimated 80,000 Maori lived on the islands. By the 1890s, just half of them remained. Many were killed during wars fighting for their land, or died from diseases brought by the Europeans. Meanwhile, the European population had grown to over 700,000. By 1939, the British had taken over 90% of Maori land. For over a century, the treaty was essentially ignored by the government. But the 1970s brought an awakening. Maori were inspired by global civil rights movements, particularly the Black and Indigenous activism unfolding in the US. A new generation of Maori activists emerged.
My father used to say this: if you criticize a white man, it's you who gets hurt, not the white man. So you must be very careful not to criticize the white man. But my generation did. Our generation would have to be the one to do something about it, to recover our language, to recover our lands, to recover our rights, to have equal citizenship in this country.
Fast forward to the Land March of 1975. The demands started getting international attention. It took 6 months to plan the 29-day march. It grew to around 5,000 people from all over the country. Once those marching arrived in Parliament, they presented a petition of their demands, signed by over 60,000 people. Protests forced the government to respond, and the Waitangi Tribunal was established that year to investigate violations of the 1840 treaty. Mutu says that the first years of the tribunal were simply just another government body ignoring Maori needs. However, in the early 1980s, a Maori judge was appointed as chair of the tribunal, and things immediately started changing. While the tribunal only makes recommendations for government action, it paved the way for future reparations.
To learn the lessons of the last 150 years, and to admit that the treaty has been imperfectly observed.
Since 1995, the New Zealand government has issued formal apologies and paid over $2.1 billion in settlements to various iwi. But the process has been far from straightforward. No settlements are the same, nor is the process of negotiating a settlement. Some iwi received major settlements, like the Tainui people, who were the first to win a settlement, secured $170 million, around 155 square kilometers of land, and a formal apology from Queen Elizabeth II herself in 1995.
And another first, this law includes an apology to Māori.
It remains the largest settlement given to an iwi. Other tribes haven't yet been able to achieve the same outcome.
Usually give us things like, offer us land like contaminated land and, those sorts of things. They will never give us back the land that they've privatised. They will never give that back. What they do is they make us buy it back off them. So These settlements are held up to be just, they go to the United Nations and say, isn't this marvellous? But if you go and talk to our Maori people about these settlements, they have traumatised our people because they play dividing rule to force these settlements onto the various iwi around the country.
I object to this process. I object to the Crown. How dare they tell us what to do?
This struggle between Indigenous peoples and settler governments isn't unique to New Zealand. Around the world, Indigenous groups are fighting similar battles over land rights, sovereignty, and cultural preservation. Take Australia, for instance. While New Zealand at least has the Treaty of Waitangi as a founding document recognising Maori rights, Indigenous Australians have no such protection. Even today, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are still fighting for a voice to Parliament, a struggle that faced a major setback in the 2023 referendum, when the Australian public voted against giving Indigenous peoples a formal say in policies affecting them. Similar patterns are playing out in Canada, where First Nations people continue to battle against pipeline projects through their territory, and in Latin America, where Indigenous communities face displacement from their ancestral lands.
We're getting messages in from Indigenous peoples around the world encouraging us to keep fighting, because they are watching us. Our message to those people is always, to our Indigenous relations around the world is Māori will never, ever give up who we are.
As one of the few countries with a formal treaty recognising Indigenous rights, how New Zealand handles its relationship with Maori people could set important precedents for Indigenous rights worldwide. But how does the Treaty of Waitangi differ from other treaties colonisers signed with Indigenous communities?
Ours was written in our own language and therefore is interpreted through our culture and our way of seeing things. And that is the essential difference. It meant that we would be Māori no matter what, and that our lands, our right to be who we are, to organise ourselves, they would always be ours, and we would always have the final say about those sorts of things. And I think probably that is why our treaty has been so powerful for us.
If a country with such a strong legal framework for Indigenous rights can roll back decades of progress through measures like the Treaty Principles Bill, it could cause a ripple effect of similar reversals globally, especially where Indigenous communities already have fewer protections. The United Nations Special Rapporteur on Indigenous Rights has already expressed concern about New Zealand's policy shifts, warning that they could undermine international standards for Indigenous rights protections. As protests continue and debate over the Treaty Principles Bill intensifies, New Zealand faces fundamental questions about its constitutional future and the relationship between Maori, the Crown, and the New Zealand state.